Hi, and welcome to Gaming with EaselJS, an advanced Canvas course on Tuts+. In this lesson, we're going to round off the basic functionality of our game by creating a heads-up display, or HUD. The HUD can be used to help players not only keep track of their current score or the player's health, but also what area they're in, what particular quadrant they're exploring, and what level they're in. So start your grunt task and open up your source code, and we're going to start by creating a new module. This module will be HUD.js. Our HUD service is going to end up being an event dispatcher and receiver. So we're going to need the create.js event dispatcher class, the create.js event. We'll set up an alias to create.js, and we'll also need the width and height of our canvas. We'll have to get that passed in using an init function. We'll also need a display object on which to put all of our HUD interface. So we'll call this HUD. I'm keeping the display part of our HUD service separate from the event dispatching and receiving. Next, I'm going to have an isDirty variable. I only want to update our HUD if the data has been changed, so we can use this flag to determine that. I'm going to keep a hash of all of our variable texts. So the text object we use to display health and score, I want to keep them in here. And I want to keep a separate hash of the values that we want to track, such as health and score. Next, we need to dispatch our HUD service API. We're going to have a get method for retrieving the HUD display object and an init method. We're putting these onto module exports, but we're also holding them in a HUD service variable so that we can attach the event dispatcher functions to our service. Let's start with the init function. So HUD init, we're going to require an x and y value, which are the dimensions of our canvas. We'll use event dispatcher.initialize and pass in the HUD service so that we can now call on and dispatch event on the HUD service itself. We'll set our width and height values, and we'll create our HUD using another function. Otherwise, we'll want to have our HUD tick handler and an update and set handlers. These two events here are our own events that we're going to be using to update the heads up display. Our HUD get function will simply return the display object HUD. So let's create our heads up display. Our HUD is going to be a new container positioned at 0, 0, and we'll be returning that. We're going to want to create a header. We'll set this to Space Shooter, give it a font of 16 pixels, Arial, and a color of a very light gray. We can add that as a child of new HUD. We'll set the X and Y position. We'll set the Y position as 8, so up the top, and the X position will be half the width of the canvas minus half the width of the header itself, essentially centering it. Our score label will say score, and it will be positioned to the far right side of the screen. So we'll position it at the width of the screen minus the width of the label minus another 20 to give it some space. Our health label will be added all the way to the left side of the screen, 20 pixels from the left. And now we have our actual variable values, so the values that are going to change. We'll set texts.score, so this is our text hash that we can keep track of, and we'll set that so it displays the current value score, and we'll position it with text alignment right, and we'll position it to the far right of the screen, but a bit lower. And we'll do the same with health, but we'll position that to the left of the screen below our health label. This get measured width is a easel function of easel text class, and it's just a function that will retrieve for us the width of these text values. So now that we have our HUD, we can actually put it on the screen to see how it looks. If we go to our main file up the top, we can require our HUD, and we can initialize it after we've prepared our world, passing in our display width and height, and we can add the HUD to our stage. Remember, if we want to get to the display object of the HUD, we have to use HUD.get. So here we can see our game with our heads up display over the top here. So before we implement any more of the HUD logic, let's take a look at how our hero in Meteor will be using the HUD service. Once we've included the HUD service into the Meteor class, our Meteor can send a message when it is destroyed just before we remove it and its display object from the stage. It will dispatch an update event onto the HUD service, telling the service to update the property score, adding a value of 10. Our hero, on the other hand, once again after we've added the HUD service, will fire the set message on the HUD service, setting the property of health to the value this.health. So let's go back to the HUD service and set up these two event handlers, onUpdate and onSet. So on update, we're first going to want to check if there is any event data. If there isn't, then we can't do anything. Then we want to see if there is an event.data.property and event.data.value. With both of these values, we can continue and basically set the values property and set that equal to plus equals value. So basically incrementing like so. Then we can set isDirty to true so that our tick handler will be able to update. The onSet command is almost the same, except when we get down to setting the property, we actually set it equal to value rather than incrementing. Now all that's left is to fill in our tick handler. So on tick, the first thing we need to do is figure out if we need to do anything. If isDirty is true, then we know that we need to update something. Then we can iterate over each key in our values hash. If values.hasOwnProperty of key, this is just to prevent that we don't iterate the object's prototype, we can get the text object, this is the display object, from our texts hash using the same key. And if there is a text object, we'll set its text value equal to values key. Then at the end of that, we can set isDirty back to false, and we're done. So now if we go looking for meteors to shoot, you can see that it's updating the score. And if we take damage, it updates the health as well. And so that's all there is to it really. Now I'm sure you can already see some possible problems with the approach so far. The fact that we have the number 100 for the hero health written in here, but also existing in our hero's initialization, is not really optimal. We could create some kind of shared global config module that would hold these values, or we could probably just rewrite things in such a way as to have that responsibility in just one place. If you'll join me for the next and final concluding lesson, we'll talk about some of the areas that we could improve this game and what could be your next steps in learning more about game development. Ciao!